Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 8th. We have a lot to get into. Of course, last night we saw the first championship, or the third championship, I should say, for the Florida Gators. We're going to talk about that game as well as getting into a little bit more on the Denver Nuggets surprise firing of GM and head coach Mike Malone and Calvin Booth, as well as a little bit on the House versus NCAA settlement, Julio Jones retirement, and a check-in on the draft with it just 16 days away. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 8th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show here talking about the big game from last night. Florida took care of business, their third national title in a thriller of a game. Final score 65-63. Todd Golden, his first title, previously had 0 tournament wins. I'm curious how that is going to affect the rest of coaching hires in the future. A lot of times you like to look at coaches that have had success in tournaments, but maybe you just go take a promising guy, someone that can, bring guys in, keep them together, keep them motivated, which is the most important thing, because this is a Florida team that never gave up. As much as we talk about Houston never giving up against that Duke team on the Final Four, Florida did the exact same thing. And it wasn't just in this game. It was all tournament long. 4 of their 6 games they had to come back from. They had comebacks, and they had that win probability chart that looked almost identical to the way that they played against the Auburn Tigers last time out. They were down by 12 in this one. They were down by 12. Houston was dominating them offensively. Defensively, they just shut them down. The defense was incredible from Houston and from Florida really all game long. This is the first win all season long that Florida has had when they scored less than 70 points in a game. For a Florida team that's coming in, scoring around 90 points per game, they get a massive victory, giving them the crown, the national championship crown. A lot of this game was not the way that Florida wanted it to go, right? In the first half, Walter Clayton Jr., their star player, the guy that's been named the player of the tournament, had 0 points. He didn't score his first basket until 14:57 to go in the game. That is over 25 minutes of basketball without your leading scorer, a guy that scored 30 points in back-to-back games in the Elite Eight and the Final Four, a feat that had only been done previously by Larry Bird. This is why they were down for most of it. They were down 12 at one point, which makes it the third largest comeback, tied for the third largest comeback in the final in March Madness Finals history, right? This was a great game. They showed up. They stopped Houston from really shutting this game away, right? They had opportunities. They had a little bit of a struggle from the field. Both teams had trouble shooting. They both had trouble getting what they wanted. There was a couple weird officiating things. There was a goaltending that wasn't called against Florida. Would have given 2 more points to the Cougars, which imagine how that could have gone. But of course, the story of this game is what happened on the final possession. Houston had the ball with 17 seconds to go after a really clutch set of possessions defensively, and on the other side of the ball offensively from the Florida Gators had given them a lead for the first time since it was 8-6 early on in the game. Houston led this game for nearly 39 minutes. Houston had the lead for all but 1 minute and 7 seconds of the game, but that minute and 7 seconds was huge. Houston, off of a timeout, inbounds the ball from the opposite end. They've got 17 seconds. They've got time to call game. You want to get it to the hands of your shooters, right? LJ Cryer led all scorers in this game with 19 points. He was 4 of 10 from 3-point range. Him and Will Richard of Florida were going really back and forth with each other. Their teams were leading scorers respectively. Richard putting up 18 points on 4 of 7 from 3, adding 8 rebounds of his own. But LJ Cryer didn't get the ball for the final shot. Instead, it went to Emmanuel Sharp. Emmanuel Sharp, who also, like Cryer, is an excellent three-point shooter. He was 1 for 7 in the game from three-point range, finished with 8 points overall. He, unfortunately, got caught by that Florida defense. Coming off of a double screen, he looked like it was open. He was looking to put up the shot, changes his mind at the last second. Unfortunately, he had already jumped. The ball, of course, then hits the floor. He can't touch it. He's trying to signal to his team to get it, and Alex Condon, the big man from Florida, the 7-footer out of Australia, comes up with a huge steal. Obviously, a brutal way for this game to end, but it kind of was what you expect. It's March Madness, right? March Madness, there is nothing that you can expect to go right. And we have seen now 3 straight games in the Final Four, 2 straight games, I should say, that have come down to the last possession. Duke, Houston, now Houston, Florida in the finals. Florida continues the trend. When we were doing our eliminations at the beginning of this, they were one of those 5 teams that could have possibly won it. Houston was not, because Houston was not in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. But this was a really good game, right? Houston did not get what they wanted out of it. Of course, they've now been to 7 Final Fours without winning a championship, the most out of any program in college basketball. They just couldn't make a shot down the stretch. They did a really good job defensively. Kelvin Sampson did a great job, and they'll be good again, right? But this felt like the year for them to get it done. They were playing like the best team in the country. They had just beaten the team that was playing like the best team in the country. They were very good at closing out games. This was the first game all season where they had a lead of 10 or more points and they failed to win. This was the first really comeback loss that they had given up all season long. Florida, of course, though, they're the Cardiac Kings. They're built for this. Todd Golden and his team had just done a million comebacks. They were comfortable the whole time. They had confidence, and everything really started changing when Walter Clayton started making shots, right? This was the lowest scoring first half since the 2011 finals. It's been a very long time since there were this few amount of points scored in the first half of a game. But that's because both of these defenses were playing really good basketball. It was a 6-point game at halftime, kept them in it. Florida, of course, goes down after that 15-minute mark. They go down 12, but that's where Walter Clayton showed up. He had a couple tough buckets, a couple tough and ones, finished with 11.7 assists and 5 rebounds in what was definitely his worst game of this season, and at least probably of this season, and at least of this tournament, right? Walter Clayton Jr. is someone that had led them to the top, and the fact that they were able to survive without him shows the depth. That's what Florida was known for. Florida is going to be back again next season. They're going to be very good. So is Houston. This was, as we said, when we take a look at this tournament, we take a step back. There are a lot of big claims. This is the worst tournament ever. There hasn't been a less competitive tournament, but it really turned the whole thing on its head in the finals, in the Final Four. We had 3 excellent games from all 4 1 seeds. They put everything they had on the court, and sure, there was a little bit of a lack of a Cinderella story here, but this was the most watched Final Four since 2017. This was probably the best Final Four that we have seen in at least the last 15 years. It was one of the best Final Fours ever, really. You had 3 really good games, 4 really good teams. 4 of the top 6 teams to ever make the Final Four were in this Final Four, which is really impressive. We got exactly what we wanted. This was a great tournament. The college basketball season is over now. There is a lot to look back on. But Florida is your 2025 NCAA basketball champions. Congratulations to the Gators. They get their 3rd national title. I'm really curious how this is going to affect the draft stock of a guy like Walter Clayton Jr., who really came on during the tournament, hit a lot of clutch shots. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you think he goes in the draft? Is he a top 15 pick now? Has he found his way into the first round? Where do you have him sitting? I'd love to hear what you think. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the Nuggets. Breaking news today, they have fired their head coach Mike Malone as well as their GM Calvin Booth. Both are out at their positions with the Denver Nuggets. We'll talk about what that means for them, what history they've joined with this move, and why it even happened. All coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over the 2025 National Championship game that saw the Gators be crowned as a national champion. In this segment, we turn our attention to the breaking news of the day. Sticking in the sport of basketball, the Denver Nuggets, out of nowhere, have fired head coach Mike Malone and GM Calvin Booth. We'll talk about that in a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 8th. But like I was saying, we are going to get here a little bit onto the big breaking news of the day. The Nuggets have fired head coach Mike Malone with just 3 games to go in the regular season. That is tied for a record for the latest a coach has ever been fired into the season. And it's a little bit of a concerning trend, right? We've now seen 3 coaches fired this season. Of course, the first one, the Kings head coach, was fired very early on in the season. This is not something that makes a big deal now, but the reason I bring that one up is because we, of course, had Mike Malone, the head coach, now former head coach of the Nuggets, come out and say that that was a spineless move by the Kings. Not his exact words, but those are the intent behind his words. He came out and he said that's a spineless move. You don't fire a coach like that. He had, of course, Mike Brown had been on his staff before, so we had a little bit of a relationship there. But then we had the big one. Taylor Jenkins of the Memphis Grizzlies was fired with just 9 games to go in the regular season. Just 9 games to go in the regular season, we saw a head coach fired. And now, we still really don't know all the details, but this was one that probably was going to happen at the end of the season, but it really has taken away all their momentum. We see the Grizzlies have really struggled to win games with a new head coach in the building, a associate head coach in the building. Just an interim head coach has not really been what has worked out for this team so far, as they've fallen all the way down into the play-in tournament when they were competing for that second seed. Now, they can still get all the way up to 3. But it makes it look a little bit harder when you don't have your head coach. And the Denver Nuggets are in that same pile, right? They now fire their head coach. I know he hasn't really been the greatest over the last couple games. They've lost 4 games in a row now. Jokic has been amazing over those last games, but Malone won the Nuggets their lone championship back in 2023. He's also the only coach that Nikola Jokic has ever had. This, of course, I can't imagine this decision being made without Nikola Jokic being okay with it. This is not a player in Jokic that I feel like you can blindside a move like this with. He might not care too much, but your star player needs to be informed when you're making a move as drastic as this one, not just the head coach, but the GM as well. The GM, who has made his fair share of mistakes over the years, but Mike Malone had a 59% winning percentage over the last 10 years with this organization. Again, he was a championship coach. Now 4 of the last 6 coaches that won an NBA championship are no longer employed by the team that they won the championship with. It has not been a good time to win a championship. Mike Malone ousted is shocking news. Now, there have been clips resurfacing of him coming out and basically saying his players don't watch film, saying that, this isn't a great... saying that his players aren't really trying that hard, which is not something you want to say publicly, but to me, to fire him at the end of the season as you're getting prepared for playoffs, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. I do understand you want to move off of him, but for a team that is really trying to make a postseason push, for a team that is really trying to be a championship level team around Nikola Jokic while they still can, this is a move that just stinks of a huge mistake, right? And I've heard people coming out and saying that this is something that signals a rebuild. You are not rebuilding when Jokic is there. I'm sorry. You gave him a massive contract. You gave Jamal Murray a massive contract, and you can see the impact of Jamal Murray. He's missed the last couple games. Without him running that 2-man game with Jokic, this is a team that just barely is not good enough to win games. They moved off of KCP, off of Brown a couple seasons ago after they won a championship. Those guys no longer on the roster, and those were the guys that Mike Malone really wanted. Apparently, there was a rift heading into this season surrounding KCP. Mike Malone reportedly really wanted KCP back, while the GM in Calvin Booth did not want him back. Calvin Booth, of course, makes the roster moves, makes those decisions, so he has the final say in all of this, which is why he's now on the Magic. But either way, it's landed them both in the same place, on the streets. Booth has not had the greatest string of moves. Again, outside of bringing in KCP and bringing in Christian Brown, none of these guys, none of the moves they've made really have been super inspired. Brought in Russell Westbrook. That one, I kind of like the pairing, but it just hasn't quite been enough. Of course, paying Jamal Murray a lot of money is a controversial one. I still don't hate that contract. But to fire Mike Malone, again, I don't have a problem with you firing a coach. I don't have a problem with you firing Mike Malone. He, as good as he is, and the fact that they won an NBA championship is a huge thing recently. But I question how much of that had to do with Mike Malone as opposed to Nikola Jokic just being the best player on the planet, right? It's not that the scheme is bad. It's just not, the number one thing that I point to for the Nuggets' success. So I understand if you wanted to fire the coach. But again, my biggest issue with this, and my biggest issue with basically everything that's gone on in the NBA, is the timing of all of this. Who in their right mind decided that 3 games before the season is done, decided that right before you're going into a playoff stretch, regardless of the playoffs, right in the most crucial stretch of games where you are neck and neck with everybody, half a game up on 4 teams holding on to that 4 seed, trying to get some home court advantage. I understand you might not care about seeding, but seeding matters, right? I know last year they lost in their home court on Game 7, but it helped that it was there, right? It really did. It helped that they were there, and now you're just going to give that away willingly. A transition to a new head coach, to an interim head coach, takes time. And you don't want to be in the middle of that transition when you're getting prepared for the playoffs. It makes no sense to me. This move has taken me by surprise. I just don't understand the timing. Again, I don't agree with the firing, but I understand firing Mike Malone. I understand moving off of Calvin Booth. But you have kneecapped yourself if you're trying to think of yourselves as a contender this year by moving off of them now. It makes no sense to me at all. I don't understand what these NBA teams are thinking. I don't know what they're doing. We'll see how this affects the team as just 3 games left to go in the season. They could fall all the way to the 8th seed, and that would not be good. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of this firing? What do you think of the timing of this firing? Is it going to help? Is it going to hurt the Nuggets? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NCAA as a whole. We have been tracking this story for a long time, but the final arguments were today in the House versus the NCAA settlement case. We're going to talk about what's been proposed. We're going to talk about what might come out of it, and if it does happen, when it'll go into effect. All of that's coming up and more here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 8th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over everything you need to know about the Nuggets firing their head coach and their GM out of nowhere today with just 3 games to go in the regular season. In this segment, we turn our attention over to a proposed settlement between the NCAA and the House in one of the biggest pieces of news that could shake the foundation of the NCAA right now. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 8th. But like I was saying, we are going to get a little bit here into what's going on in the House versus NCAA suit. They had their final arguments today. Nothing has quite come out about what was said in there that at least I have seen so far, but I have seen a couple proposals and things that could have come out of it. The latest proposal is a 50% revenue split between the players and the schools. This is obviously something that's going to affect a lot of things, not just when you think of NIL, the players that you think of, right? It's the basketball players, it's the football players. These are the guys that you think of when you think of the ones that are getting money, but this is going to affect a lot more than that. You have to think about how Title IX might be affected by this. Of course, there were a couple rulings where Title IX was going to be considered a part of NIL, and then another separate ruling that came down a little after that said NIL will not be a part of Title IX. It won't be affected, so they won't have to split it equally between men and women athletes, which would have thrown a whole nother wrinkle into all of these things. But what it is allowing them to do is pay schools directly. Schools have the ability now, if approved, to have around $20 million. That's the number that's been thrown around in conversations, to pay these players directly. They can use it however they want. It's like a salary cap of sorts. The NCAA would also have to pay out about $3 billion, $2.8 billion to be exact, in damages over the next 10 years for name, image, and likeness stuff that players suffered for in the past, right? But the big question for me, aside from how it's going to be implemented as a part of Title IX, is the non-revenue generating sports, the Olympic sports. We've already seen a change with the roster limits changing, so you have less roster spots, unlimited scholarships. You're seeing some roster spots already get cut. We're seeing some programs get cut entirely from other schools because they're trying to budget to have a better football program, to pay for these players so they can have, a national title, get that money, just lots of stuff that's going into these revenue sports. The Olympic sports are really important, though. Of course, outside of the Olympics, they don't get too much coverage, but it is something that can help be a driver to a lot of these schools. It can help bring in a bunch of applicants to these schools. It's something that might not be a huge money maker, might be a money deficit kind of thing, but still, it's good to have these opportunities for these students, and it's also just good for us in a world stage, right? The U.S. has dominated sports over the last 50, 75 years in an international space. A lot of it in part because of how much funding goes into these Olympic sports, right? We fund all of them. We have these at colleges all around the country. People can go anywhere and get this. But as this changes, as the NCAA isn't a monolith of an organization, as it cedes power to the SEC and the Big Ten, as football separates itself from the rest of these sports and a big revenue driver goes away, what's going to happen to these non-revenue generating sports? What's going to happen to these Olympic sports? How is this going to affect us in the world stage? And I think that's going to be the biggest question to ask, right? Obviously, paying players is a good thing. I don't think that's a controversial take. It would have been a couple years ago, but I don't think that's a controversial take. Paying players is a good thing. The NCAA has gone its entire existence really propped up on this idea of amateurism, propped up on this idea of, they're student athletes, students first, athletes second. But a lot of times that isn't the case. Like, they're students, of course, but they're not amateurs. They should be allowed to go make money. They're very public figures. People are making money off of them. Why can't they make money off of themselves? Being allowed to pay them directly, I think, adds a whole nother wrinkle as well, where we have seen an idea propped up, and I really like this idea for these mid-major schools, these group of 5 schools, to at least benefit a little bit from being developmental programs for the SEC and the Big Ten and the Pac-12, or the Big 12, and the ACC, right? These developmental schools would have now the ability to pay their players directly, and something that I think would be really interesting, you have coaches that you have to have buyouts for in their contract. Put players' contracts with some buyouts, kind of like they do in the European soccer leagues over there. Not saying we need to go to relegation, that's a whole nother thing, but I do think that throwing in something to at least reward these schools for finding the talent as opposed to just siphoning them out and not giving them a chance to succeed, maybe we start to see some contracts where we're not going to lock you down for a certain number of years, but if you do go, you have to pay us this much money, right? It has to be worth this much money. A little buyout thing I do think would go a long way there. as well as potentially for the bigger schools, they get these high school recruits that they have to pay a lot of money for. Maybe they say, I'm giving you a 3-year contract. You have to play with us for a couple years. You can't transfer, or no transfer clause kind of thing. These are the kind of things that are going to start to change. Now that this is going to be treated more like a professional league, now that this is going to be treated more like a business, we're going to start to see contracts and numbers come out of there, a whole nother agent industry come out of this. I'm really curious how it's going to affect all of these sports, but more importantly, how it's going to affect the sports that aren't going to be big on the NIL, like those Olympic sports again. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about all of this? What do you think is going to happen with the Olympic sports, with football, with basketball, now that schools are going to be allowed to pay everybody on July 1st, assuming that this goes through, which all indications are seemingly saying that it will go through the way that it is. But we'll update you, as always, when more information comes out. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these questions. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Julio Jones, one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, officially hangs it up after 13 seasons in the NFL. We'll talk about his career, where he ranks, and when he'll get into the Hall of Fame, if he'll get in at all. That's coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over everything you need to know about the updates to the House versus NCAA settlement with the final arguments today. In this segment, we turn our attention to Julio Jones. Julio Jones out of the NFL officially after 13 seasons. Future Hall of Fame wide receiver, had an excellent career. We'll talk about where it stands up to a lot of other players and if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer or not. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 8th. But like I was saying, we are going to get a little bit here into what's going on with Julio Jones. Julio Jones, of course, hangs up his cleats after 13 seasons in the NFL. In my opinion, a future Hall of Fame wide receiver. He put up stats: 13,700 receiving yards, 914 catches, with 66 of them going for a touchdown. Played in 166 games. He was an first-team All-Pro twice, made the second-team All-Pro a couple more times, and a 7-time Pro Bowler. He led the entire league in receiving yards twice, with his career high being over 1,800 yards in one single season. When you take a look at where he sits in the all-time list for the 3 major wide receiver rankings, it's a little lower than you might expect. 16th all-time when it comes to receiving yards, 27th in receptions with 914, and then 61st when it comes to touchdowns. But does that mean that that he doesn't deserve to be the Hall of Fame? No. He absolutely is a Hall of Famer. If you think Julio Jones is not a Hall of Famer, you're blind. He is one of the top wide receivers in the 2010s. He was inducted into the 2010s Hall of Fame class. They do one for every decade team. He, of course, will make the Hall of Fame. The more intriguing question for me is if he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Pro Football Reference, when you take a look at the Hall of Fame track counter that they have, they gave him a rating of 108. 108 is 8 points higher than the average Hall of Fame receiver, which they have at 100. But that would put him as the 13th best receiver of all time. That is an interesting ranking. Of course, that's not a perfect ranking. It takes into account a whole lot of things, but it is something that helps us compare every single wide receiver that's ever played the game. He's not stacking up to Randy Moss. He's not stacking up to your Terrell Owens. He's not stacking up to your Jerry Rices, right? But what he is doing is absolutely Hall of Fame worthy. Now, is he going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer is the question. And that one, I think, is really interesting. There have been 92 first ballot Hall of Famers in the history of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. 7 of those are wide receivers. We're talking again about guys like Randy Moss. We're talking about guys like Jerry Rice. We're talking about Steve Largent. These elite players of NFL lore at the wide receiver position, and only 7 of them have been first ballot Hall of Famers. Now, a lot of that might have to do with the fact that football was a running first game for most of its existence, right? It's only in the last 30 to 40 years where we've seen a huge emergence of the passing game with quarterbacks like Dan Marino helping us move out of I guess I call it the Stone Age of football, where it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, the running back being the big star of the team. Now it's the quarterback, the wide receivers, and of course it's gonna be ebbs and flows. It's gonna go up, it's gonna go down. You're gonna change from running to passing in a little bit, and we saw a huge resurgence of running backs last season. So it's not like running backs are going away anytime soon. I don't think they ever will. But we're going to start to see a lot more first ballot Hall of Fame receivers. Larry Fitzgerald is on the ballot. He will go in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Steve Smith was not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's someone that you could think about as being up there, rated very similarly to Julio Jones. Now, I think Julio Jones is a better receiver than him. I just don't think it's going to be enough for him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. It is something that we can revisit in 5 years. I think right now, the main thing that's stopping him isn't what he did when he was at the peak of his powers, because when he was at the peak of his powers, he was the best receiver in the league, right? Julio Jones, if he had retired right after he left the Falcons, he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? Calvin Johnson is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's got very similar stats to Julio Jones. The difference being he retired right at the end of his prime, or in the middle of his prime, really. He could have gone a whole lot longer. Julio Jones had that whole era where he played for the Titans, where he played for the Eagles, where he ran around the league and didn't get a lot of snaps, wasn't his elite self that you would expect of him back in 2015, 2016, 2017, years like that where he was dialed on the football field. Because of that, I think it hurts his first ballot case, right? Longevity does a lot for people's case. We look at Frank Gore. He's going to make the Hall of Fame because of longevity. Eli Manning, he's going to make the Hall of Fame. I don't really want to call it because of longevity, but he's going to make the Hall of Fame, and you can make that argument there, right? Larry Fitzgerald was going to make the Hall of Fame anyway, but his longevity, I think, helps push him into that first ballot kind of conversation, right? Longevity is something that in the NFL is incredibly impressive. And for someone to be able to do it for 20 years, for someone to be able to do it for 15 years should be taken into consideration. But you have to talk about the quality of those years. And in this case, it hurts Julio Jones's future. It hurts his potential to make a first ballot Hall of Fame. Does that stop his case from being a Hall of Famer? Absolutely not. He is a Hall of Famer, but does it make him a first ballot Hall of Famer? Probably not. We can have a conversation. He could find his way into that top 10 wide receivers of all time kind of list. He's very close to there. Again, 13th by Pro Football by Pro Football Reference is kind of where I'm judging, because that, again, it's just one stat that compares everybody. Numbers, they can lie, but they don't like to lie. They like to just tell you what's going on. So we're going to use that for now. So a borderline top 10 wide receiver of all time, of course, is a Hall of Famer. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Does he make it in his first try? Is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? What do you think of Julio Jones? What's his legacy in the game? Is he the best receiver of the 2010s? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the draft. The draft is just 16 days away now. We really need to start buttoning in. What is true? What is false? We're going to weed through the rumors for all of the potential quarterbacks to be in this draft class, where they might end up, who might take them, how many are going in the first round. That's all coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, April 8th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over everything to do with Julio Jones. Julio Jones, a future Hall of Fame wide receiver, retires after 13 seasons for 4 different teams. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the draft. One star goes out, a whole bunch more stars potentially find their way in. Today we focus on the quarterbacks. Of course, this is a time in the NFL of rumors, of lies, of smoke screens. We're going to find our way through all of it. Climb to the top, to the truth, where every single NFL QB might get drafted this year. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, April 8th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit here where each quarterback is going to end up. We're going to start off nice and easy with the number 1 projected pick in the draft, Cam Ward. Cam Ward most likely goes number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans, but there's also a chance that he could slide all the way down to 3. There is not a shot in the world that he gets past 3, in my opinion. If he gets past 2, it's going to be a miracle as well. I don't think the Cleveland Browns are going to pass it up to go with Kenny Pickett this season. It just doesn't seem like something that they might do. Cam Ward, regardless of how early he goes, will be the one and only surefire first-round quarterback in this draft. The next one that is most likely to go in the top 10 is Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders, of course, kind of was in that 1-2 conversation. When the first mock drafts came out after the Super Bowl, Shedeur Sanders was expected to go number 3 to the Giants, number 2 to the Browns. Now, of course, things have changed a little bit. Shedeur Sanders is getting a lot of hate because his father is Deion Sanders, a very prolific figure in the media. He doesn't deserve it. One of the biggest knock on Shedeur Sanders is the fact that he has a big personality, basically. And everything I've seen of the kid, everything I've seen in interviews, and the way he's handled himself has been amazing. I have no concerns about him, how he's going to handle himself. Shedeur Sanders, though, is not a guarantee to go in the first round. He could go as high as number 2. But again, he could also fall out of the first round. There are rumors of him connecting him to the New York Giants at 3. There are rumors connecting him to the Saints at pick number 9. There are rumors connecting him to the Steelers at 21. There are rumors connecting him all over the first round, but there's also a rumor that he could fall out of the first round. Now, personally, I don't think he falls out of the first round. In fact, I think he's more likely to go in the top 10 than he is to fall out of the first round. But as we get closer to the draft and the smoke screens start to clear out, we get a clearer picture of this. Shedeur Sanders is a really interesting one, and one that could have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the draft. And that is because there's a couple other interesting quarterbacks. Early on in the draft class, it seemed like there was only going to be 2 quarterbacks playing or that will be drafted in the first round. Of course, quarterbacks rise, their stock rises and falls like nobody's business during this whole process, right? There's all of these, this guy could go in the first round. We had a little bit of the Tyler Show from Louisville hype in the first round. That one, I think, is ridiculous. That has gone away a little bit. You also had a little bit of hype for Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, and those are the 2 we're going to focus on next, because those guys, I think, at the latest go in the 3rd round. Those are guys that I see going day 2, definitely not day 3. Jalen Milroe, I think, is the most interesting one. I also think he's the most likely, if there are 3 quarterbacks to go in the first round, to be going. And the reason I say that, you asked me a week ago, it would have been Jackson Dart. The reason that I say it's Jalen Milroe is because he's accepted an invitation to go to the NFL draft. He had dinner with the Steelers. He knows something we don't, of course. The Steelers were not expecting to have dinner with him. The Steelers are still looking for a quarterback, and even when they sign Aaron Rodgers, I expect them to draft a quarterback of the future, because Aaron Rodgers is not a quarterback for the future. He could go at 21. He could also fall out of the first, and if he does, I heard some rumblings at the beginning of the second round. Maybe the Browns skip on quarterback and then take Jalen Milroe in the early second round. Maybe the Saints skip on quarterback and get him in the second round. But Jalen Milroe is a guy that I think is truly between day 1 and day 2, probably doesn't get out of the second or the third round. A lot of what I just said for Jalen Milroe goes for Jackson Dart as well. Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss had a lot of hype after what he did at the Senior Bowl. He's also rumored to the Steelers at 21. Also rumored to the Saints at number 9. He's been higher up in that top 10 for a lot longer than a guy like Jalen Milroe has been. But Jackson Dart, I think, is a guy that if there's going to be any odd man out quarterback, it would be him. The quarterbacks that I'm looking at to go in day 2, that's the group he falls in. The day 1 quarterbacks, I think, are Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. The in-between quarterbacks, I think, are Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart in between day 1 and 2. And the day 2 quarterbacks, I think the only surefire day 2 guy, I think, is Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers out of Texas kind of has disappeared in this process. He had a lot of hype heading into it. He doesn't seem like a guy that really is going to be too highly drafted. He's in between the day 2 and day 3 guys, but there are a lot of day 3 guys or undrafted. Kyle McCord is one of those day 3 guys who I like a lot. Formerly of Ohio State, now coming out of Syracuse. He just set the ACC all-time record for passing yards in a season. He had a really good year. Will Howard at Ohio State, the replacement for Kyle McCord, just went out and won a national championship. He's might go in day 3. Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon just led the number 1 team in the nation, didn't lose until the playoffs. He might go day 3. Tyler Show, we talked about him already a little bit. I think he's a day 3 guy, as well as Riley Leonard, all day 3 or undrafted. And there's a lot more quarterbacks that could potentially go in this draft, but we've just gone through a list of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys, and I don't think all 9 will get drafted. But when we're looking at making our tiers, the day 1 tier, I think very simply is just Cam Ward. The maybe first round tier is going to include Shadur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart. The potentially, the in-between day 2 and 3 is just going to be Quinn Ewers. And then the day 3 guys, again, Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, Tyler Show, and Riley Leonard, I think all find themselves in that club. This is going to be a really interesting quarterback class, and there's a lot of teams that need quarterback, right? The Giants still need a quarterback. They don't have a long-term answer. They brought in Jameis and Russell Wilson, but that is a stopgap answer, right? The Raiders might have extended Geno Smith, but he's also not a super long-term answer. He's a little bit up there in age. Maybe they take a risk on one of these guys. The Browns obviously need a quarterback. The Titans obviously need a quarterback. The Steelers still need a quarterback. Again, they need a long-term option. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Seahawks took a risk on one of these guys later on in the draft, because I don't know how much they really trust Sam Darnold. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you think each one of these quarterback prospects goes? Which round do you think all of these guys find a spot in the draft? And how many do you think end up getting drafted? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We will be back tomorrow. As always, every single Wednesday, we'll be doing our NBA Power Rankings, the final one before the end of the regular season on Sunday, as well as every other major event from around the world of sports. The Dodgers in danger of dropping yet another one, in danger of losing 4 in a row. We'll talk about that and much more. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.